Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing Trials of Mana for the Nintendo Switch, specifically the remake, because here in the States, we also just got the original version of Trials of Mana as part of the Collection of Mana, which also released for the Switch. So we have both an old game and a new game on the same system, released just a little less than a year apart. So that's pretty cool. It allows for a much easier time comparing the game rather than booting up a whole different system like some people might have to do. Now, I'm not going to be focusing too much on comparisons between this version and the SNES original because I only got to the town of the Beastmen, which is not very far at all, only like an hour in by comparison. So most of this is going to be treating Trials of Mana as though it's a standalone game and not relying too much on the past to say, ooh, this is better in this area and whatnot. What I can say is that this is basically a modern touch-up of the original version with full 3D graphics and animations, albeit a very cel-shaded style similar to maybe Dragon Quest. And there's also mostly full voice acting, especially in the cinematic scenes, and you have the option to choose between the original soundtrack as well as a remastered soundtrack, most of which are performed live with real instruments, which is very pleasing to the ears. You also have a lot of options to customize, such as how fast you want the camera to go. You can even adjust the individual AI for each of your opponents and how good or bad or defensive you want them to be. You also have 4 difficulty levels, which I'm pretty sure you only had 1 in the original. You can go to beginner mode if you want to restart as many times as you want in a tough battle, in case you don't like figuring out these new systems like yours truly. But there's also easy, normal, and hard if you want to seek an additional challenge. You also have 12 save files, which immensely helps for replay value. You see, one of the biggest selling points of the original Trials of Mana, which carries over nicely into this remake, is that there's actually 6 protagonists, but you can only choose 3 to accompany you on your journey. 1 main character and 2 partners. Some of the characters are meant to be paired up, and so that will unlock additional dialogues in and of itself. And the game encourages you to keep mixing and matching different combinations of party members and having different characters as your main character so that you can experience the story in all of its various facets. However, when I started this new file with an all-male party, because I did all the females first, I found that besides the opening paralogue, or prologue, where it talks about like why the characters started their journey, it seems like mostly a retread of the same journey, but just from a different perspective. So I'm not really sure if it's entirely worth it unless you're really invested in the story, which I found to be kind of lacking. At first it showed a lot of promise because when you were playing as just one character, you got to see their motivations and their struggles. But after the party actually meets each other and decides, hey, let's journey together, the story becomes, well, to avoid spoiling too much, basically just let's stop the bad guys, and the bad guys are like, let's get all the power. That's basically the quickest version I can think of to summarize the plot. So it's not really much of a story-driven game, but what is going to sell the experience is this game's amazing battle system. When you're in the field, you can switch between the 3 party members at will, assuming you've unlocked them, and when you run into a camp of enemies, it seamlessly transitions from battle to field without having to go to a separate screen or even separate music. The field music will keep playing. You'll just have a barrier that shows how far you can go before you escape from the battle. If the line is yellow, just keep running into the line until you run away. There's not really a penalty if you lose either. In fact, you even get a little bit of a reward, albeit not as much as you would if you actually stuck through with the battle. Now, you can do this as a standard button masher like a Hyrule Warriors game, but there are a couple of little extra tips that you can use to make the battles go smoother, and on the harder difficulties to be able to progress the battles at all. You have class strikes, which summon if you have enough CS, which I never figured out what CS stands for. They're basically those little crystals that bounce around on the battlefield, and if you collect enough of them, then you can power up for a final smash style finisher move. Now, this doesn't always directly kill the enemy, but it can definitely whittle down their health really quickly, especially if the enemy has a shield up initially. So switching between the characters to see which individual gauge is filled the most can be beneficial. Each character also has different statistics starting out, so you might want to choose which character fits best to your play style, or if one of the characters is too far away and another character is fighting another enemy, you might want to think about the spatial awareness aspect of everything. You have a couple of other little things, like you can press up on the directional pad on the left Joy-Con, or directional pad on the Pro Controller, to bring up all of your items, and then the battle freezes so that you can take as much time as you want to equip the items. The problem with this system is that you're limited to only a certain number during the battle, and once the battle starts, you can't change that. So if, say, you forgot to equip a healing item, then you have to lose the battle and come back in just to re-equip it. Why couldn't you just cycle through all of your items at once? Was it because they wanted to be too faithful to the SNES original? I mean, I can understand that for the time being, but this is a modern game. Why can't you just cycle through your entire inventory? Were they afraid that maybe it would slow down the battles too much? I mean, it's better to be slow than to be clobbered, don't you think? Overall, the battle system works really well, and I had a lot of fun going through most battles. This is the kind of game that doesn't feel as though you have to overly grind, at least on the easiest difficulty. You can choose friendly mode in addition to easy, normal, and hard, and if you choose friendly mode, then you can respawn as many times as you want in a tough battle, and you can actually ignore a lot of the RPG elements all you want. I didn't cast a single spell the entire time I was playing, and only like at the second half of the game did I even discover that you could do those finisher moves and the ring menu and a lot of other stuff. I just assumed, okay, let's just treat this like a Hyrule Warriors game and just hammer on the X and Y buttons in succession until I whittle down the enemy's health, switching between characters to whatever is convenient. So I appreciate that the game doesn't really require you to grind. The battles are nice and easy to escape from. Pretty much all of them are optional. And the way that you level up is also really nice too, because you get training points, and training points can go towards certain benefits, but you don't have to use them in a particular order, or even use them at all for that matter. You can choose to make your character super strong and completely ignore their defense. But you get so many training points, at least on the earliest difficulty, I can't speak for the other ones, that it's pretty much impossible that you won't completely max out your skill tree. You can also change classes, and one of the cool additions to this remake is that if you don't like the outfit that your new class is given, which is probably going to be the case because most of them get progressively more suggestive as the game goes along, you can choose whatever outfit fits your boat. Now, what I found that I didn't like about this system is that it takes way too long to change classes. And then the other problem is that the only time you can change your outfit is to that of a class outfit. Like, you buy armor in shops, why can't the armor have a physical effect on your character like they did in Xenoblade Chronicles or in Dragon Quest XI? I feel like that was a huge missed opportunity, especially when some of the descriptions sound pretty cute, like when it says that Charlotte wore a sheep's hood. That would have actually been pretty nice to see in battle, but sadly, that's only a stat boosting item and doesn't actually change your physical appearance. Now, one thing that really bothered me about the presentation was that the character models seem so out of place in this world. A lot of times they didn't even interact with the environment properly, and they would reuse the same animations and the same facial expressions over and over again. Now, I know I complained about that a lot in Dragon Quest XI and also Fire Emblem Three Houses, but in this game it feels like they took it a step further because they don't have additional cutscenes that have slightly better production values to make up for it. For instance, late in the game, when a character is hugging someone, it feels like they're doing social distancing or something, and it's like, how hard is it just to animate a hug? Like, even Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS was able to manage characters hugging each other properly. Why can't this game do it? I also feel like there were a couple of instances where the game tried too hard to preserve its Super Nintendo roots, and so certain things just felt off. Like, the characters don't really interact with each other all that much, and when they do, it's usually not in a cutscene, it's just talking on the battlefield. But this doesn't happen nearly as much as I would like, so it sort of feels like the other characters are more or less just standing there to give the illusion that you're taking on the bad guys with an army, as opposed to maybe high-fiving each other or treating each other like a huge band of brothers like they did in Final Fantasy 15. All of these niggling annoyances really added up and almost made me want to tell you guys to just dismiss this game altogether. I also got a little bit annoyed at the repetition of the music. Now, don't get me wrong, most of the music is really amazing, but they tend to repeat tracks like a lot. There's even this one track that's supposed to be super scary, but they ended up repeating that for so many instances that it sort of lost its appeal. Now, I know they were trying to go for let's remix every track from the original game, but I think it would have been nice if maybe on a few occasions they had composed a few new tunes, maybe to avoid the game feeling like, another town with the same music. Are we playing Dragon Quest XI all over again? Speaking of Dragon Quest, since this was published by Square Enix, they actually have quite a few references to their other games. You can face slimes, you can be turned into a Moogle, and you can even have costumes that are based on Final Fantasy. They're not over the top references, but you can definitely tell that this was inspired by those kinds of RPGs. Overall, Trials of Mana is a really fun game. It may not hook you very much story-wise, but I think you're going to find a lot of enjoyment out of the battle system. And if you think that the system is too hard for you to get the hang of, the multiple difficulty settings and the myriad of options and customizability allow for pretty much anyone to be able to enjoy this game. And if you don't like the music, you can always switch it to the original soundtrack, or you can even turn the music off altogether. You can also turn off the voice acting and the sound effects. There's an autosave file, and the save statues are pretty frequent if you feel like being old school and only saving at specific intervals. Overall, since this game came out in 2020, my feelings were initially mixed, but upon reflecting on it further, I think I might have to give this probably a 14 out of 20. It's a good game, not exactly the perfect game, not exactly the grand heights that maybe Square Enix was making it out to be, but it's not a bad game either. It's just sort of held back by being too much of a remake instead of a reimagining. Or maybe I'm just spoiled by Final Fantasy VII Remake. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm being too harsh? Do you think I'm being too generous? Let me know in the comments section. Until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and if you're playing Angela's Quest, the easiest way to avoid the problem of overcold is just to invest in a jacket and some sweatpants. Would that have killed them? Bye.